Hello and welcome to How to Stay Married ... So far. Lovely to have you here with us. If you're on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. If you're listening to us on any of the podcast platforms, hello. And you can see us if you want over on our YouTube channel, the Sawalha-Adderleys. It's funny actually, I just realised, what did we do last night, all of last night?
Are we allowed to talk about that?
Mark!
Well, we didn't do that. What do you mean, what did we do last night?
We were watching couples counselling, I've just realised.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I woke up this morning and said, I think we should do a How to Stay Married.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, it's a good show, isn't it?
It's so good. Yeah. Honestly, we really do recommend it. If you're here listening to a podcast called How to Stay Married, I think you'd be really interested in couples counselling. Is it on Netflix?
No, I think it's on BBC iPlayer.
And it's really good because it actually made me think about how much better we communicate than we did. Because sometimes you can just be in your marriage going, oh, I'm just doing this. I'm surviving. But actually, I just thought I'd acknowledge that.
Fair enough. We're also doing this in the midst of imminent World War III.
Yeah.
It's very hard to escape that subject in anything we record. But can I just stress that by recording something not about it doesn't mean we're not dealing with it or thinking about it. Because there seems to be this groundswell of if you complain or talk of anything else, you're being somehow irresponsible. It's just not the case. I've had a few comments like that.
And actually, we will be next week actually talking about how we are dealing as a couple with the anxiety. That was the plan for today. Actually, the anxiety of everything that's going on in the world, in the world at the moment. I just have to say, Mark, I just have to make a little confession.
What?
I moved my camera up a bit because I think it was a bit low.
I noticed. It's a little bit of a pain in the edit, but there we go.
It's going to really piss him off. So as I said, we're going to talk about anxiety and how we deal with it as a couple next week, or don't deal with it next week. But it is Eating Disorder Awareness Week.
Right.
And it's a subject that's close to my heart and closer to yours, I think, nowadays. And there'll be a lot around about the more extreme, the words that we know and understand, anorexia, bulimia, horrible way to have to live under the cosh of those extremes. But it's a broad spectrum eating disorder, and we are very much, both of us, we are in the disordered eating middle. We have a bizarre relationship with our bodies and with eating and food. And it's funny because I'm ahead of you in my understanding, and I have a lot more peace with my disordered eating. And I feel, it's every day, it's a discussion I have to have with myself. But I have a lot more consciousness of it. A, because I'm 7 years older. B, because I'm a woman, so I'm plugged into those sort of conversations much more, I think. C, I'm a loose woman. So if you're listening to this from another country, that's actually a show here in the UK, and not me actually describing myself. Well, in that it comes up a lot. We have a lot of guests on. We talk about it a lot. So it would be, it's obvious that I'm going to be a bit further along with my own understanding of my own disordered eating.
Well, do you not think that that's partly because, and maybe this is something to get onto a little bit later, but do you not think that's partly because society is much more steered towards pressurising women?
Well, yes, but I also think that society is also more geared towards when you're in the firefighting stage of directing everything towards women. And actually, there is a real increase in, and I have never seen anything written about a man of your age having disordered eating. I've seen some younger celebrities talking about the bulimia, men, and anorexia, and I think, that's incredible and really important, but I've never, ever read or heard a single word about the kind of disordered eating that you have, which is very similar to the disordered eating I have. But yet we've come from very different backgrounds. So why don't we go back to, because there's always been something that has really struck me about what you said about food. And as Mark has
Do you
discussed...
want to remind me and I'll
Yeah,
say
I'm
it?
going to tell you. As Mark has discussed with us often here, he had a very chaotic, difficult childhood, being brought up by a very young single mum, who he now loves very much, but it was very difficult as a child, wasn't it? And do you remember what you said to me about your first memory of quelling anxiety and what you did?
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, I'll just give it a bit of context first. So, I mean, without bemoaning the fact, there was a lot of time which I spent on my own when my mum was in the flat, but there was a lot of time that I spent on my own when my mum was out of the flat. And I remember vividly one of my almost first memories of food. One was that I made a potato salad in home economics, and I was so excited to bring it home, and my mum didn't eat it, and that really upset me because, you know, I really wanted her to eat it. I was really proud of it. But the other lasting memory, other than sweets and all that kind of stuff, was on my own, vividly. I mean, obviously I didn't think this is what I was doing then.
No.
I realised after the event. I just remember going into the kitchen with a spoon and eating an entire, you know, like just a pack of butter. Just ate it
because my memory
straight.
of it was you said it doesn't matter how you ate it. I suppose my memory is that you said you sliced it and you kept eating this
No,
butter.
just kept spooning it and spooning
Yeah.
it and spooning it. Maybe I used a knife, I don't know.
It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. But it's just that it just gives such a clear image and a clear understanding of what overeating and the connection to your emotions is. Because so many people still will say, if you struggle with your weight, eat less and move more.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day because where I had sort of, in a sense, in inverted commas, good parenting around my grandparents, the narrative always ran that when I arrived at my nan and granddad's, my nan was receiving me, as she would say, dark rings around your eyes, emaciated, smelling of damp, and saying ain't. You know, so I sounded like Oliver Twist. And
I was going to say we've moved into Oliver Twist now.
but just briefly to say, and then what happened, and I think this is something worth talking about, she would gorge me.
Feed you up.
She would feed me
you
up.
up.
And it reminded me, is it Hansel and Gretel fairy tale?
Yeah.
I remember reading that and really relating to it, the way they were being fed up, being fed, fed in order to be luscious and tasty. And my nan also used to say, I love you so much I could eat you. So it was a strange collision of fear, food, and departing famine. Because I literally don't remember any of the food, if any, that my mum made. Fish in a bag, I've said often, cheese on toast.
But the interesting thing is it's a feast or famine.
Yeah,
you know, it was
absolutely.
either you were with your mum,
more contrasting.
and then you would go to your nan, and that would be a comfort, a confused comfort.
Yeah.
But there would be some sort of an understanding that you were being cared for, and you're being cared for by being overfed.
Yeah. That's
And
where I
then-
discovered Nutella and chicken crisps, and it
Yeah,
sounds
and it's still a
ludicrous to talk
problem.
specifically about those, but I could eat 55 packets of chicken crisps.
And also Nutella, it's dangerous. I mean, you look at me
Oh, it
with
really is.
wide-eyed terror.
It really is. I'm pleased you got rid of it the other night. But I mean, I like with alcohol, I can smell and I can know and I can give you an exact description of what's in the house. And the weird thing is, I'm not a particular fan of sweet stuff, but it's about, and we'll talk about it, I guess, it's about filling emotions, isn't it?
Well, so that's your childhood, obviously, just a brief sketch of it. And of course, mine couldn't be any more different, could it? Because I grew up with a mum who was the war baby, and so was very, very sensible about food, a fantastic cook, no disordered eating that I was ever aware of, but a poor self-esteem about the way she looked. Like, you could say she'd look great and she'd say, well, I'm as fat as I've ever been, always. To this day, she's 88. And I say, Mum, you look so slim. And she says, why do you think do you think that's a help to lie to me? So that's, but then also, so she was a fabulous cook, and we got incredible homemade food, breakfast, lunch and dinner, homemade bread, homemade butter, everything. Very cared for. A stay-at-home mum, came home from school, you knew your mum was going to be there. You know, it was a very sort of stable, in one way, childhood. But then on the other side of my family, my father's side, Middle Eastern, and my father was incredibly loving. I grew up being completely respected by my dad, loved by my dad, listened to by my dad. Sorry, that makes me cry. Don't know why. Shall I just give me a minute?
That's all right.
And then a very big extended family, Arabic family, which in many ways I feel so blessed to have had. A very busy, large, family, big. We didn't live in a big house, we lived in a terrace house, but it felt big because it was filled with lots of huge characters, and they were people that had made their own lives. They had grown up with little. I mean, my dad grew up with, very little, and there was probably a lot of hunger for their parents. And so there's a huge emotional connection to food. And food was the center of every family gathering. We would cook together, beautiful. So lovely feelings of joy and culture. And that's how I learned to cook, being around this big family. But there was always an underlying anxiety around food, because from a very young age, when I was very active, I used to go to 6, 7 dance classes a week. As I said, we ate very well. I probably didn't have 1 pound over on my body not one. Now, my Arabic family would overfeed, like you. We brought chicken, you're not going to have chicken and lamb, you're not going to have bread. It would be like this all the time. But running parallel to that would be careful you never get fat. Be very careful. We're a family that gets fat. And that was just drip, drip, by osmosis. Nobody meant anything. Nobody was being evil. All my aunts were fat, and some of them were very, very fat. And it was a problem. They were all struggling with their weight all the time. So they were just unaware of how powerful those words can be to a young person. Fast forward to, I then go to stage school, a very rarefied world. It's not now, because being at stage school is what it's like to be at any school now for kids, because of selfies, because of this incredible awareness of the way that you look. Nobody does anything without photographing it. And the equivalent of that was being at stage school with mirrors everywhere and lots of very, very skinny dancers. Now, I was there to be an actress, I wasn't there to be a dancer. But I already had disordered thinking about food, and I'd already started dieting at about 11, even though I had no extra fat. And I remember I started by only eating apples, so I would just eat apples and end up binging at the weekend because my family would all bring this amazing food. But the being at stage school accelerated the feelings of dysmorphia, and I can look back now. I can't believe, and this has been really hard because it's only in the last few years that I can actually say, because I've been in denial all my life, and even now as I say it, I just think back, no, it is actually because I had a hideous body, that I was dysmorphic. I was dysmorphic. I mean, I look back and I had a gorgeous body, but I thought my body was so hideous that nobody could ever see it. That's how dysmorphic I was. And yet, somebody just said to me the other day, "Oh, you're just so confident. I look at you, you're really, it's Linda Robson, you're just so sexy and you're so confident." I managed, because I was a great fake it to make it person, because I had this terrible secret that I was so hideous. I just acted out the whole time that I was so confident. It was really weird. Like I would wear, I remember around the time, I would wear these like satiny cat suits out. This is a person that thought she was hideous.
But that's a huge aspect of dysmorphia. People often think that dysmorphia is, we were researching it many years ago, and one of the things that people think is dysmorphic is a covering of the body, a hiding away. And what it's actually about is many people with dysmorphia will amplify one aspect or an aspect of themselves. It can be an aspect of your personality to overcompensate for what they feel about the rest of their body. So, for example, a lot of girls who perhaps over show their cleavage, and you know, as a father, you're kind of like, my God, don't do that. They're probably doing that because they're actually feeling dysmorphic about the body. It's a curious contradiction.
Yeah.
So, but it's their way.
Yeah, I remember you saying that actually when you were researching that program. Yeah,
it's a way of sort of, as I say, amplifying an aspect that you're more comfortable with, or unfortunately for women, simply amplifying sexiness, or you know, a sort of not availability, but a sort of. That's where it becomes dangerous. I think
I think it was very confusing for any men around me, because I was also incredibly protective of myself, because I was very proud and nobody was going to know that I had this dark secret about myself, that I was this monster.
But I have to say, when I first met you, I remember thinking, well, obviously you were extraordinarily confident and out there, as was I with the drink in me. But I remember, I'm not going to reveal too much, but I do remember when you're first intimate in a relationship, I remember you being particularly cautious about showing your body.
I'm always cautious about showing my body my whole life.
But I've never come across it quite like that.
Yeah, I mean, like when and people can't believe that now when you see me on my Instagram, but what I did was aversion therapy. Eventually I did aversion therapy. And of course, I'm at my oldest, and my body is at its probably most unattractive. So all the time that I probably had a beautiful body, I was hidden away because I was dysmorphic, because I believed that I was hideous.
I've seen more of you on Instagram than I do in the bedroom.
But anyway, so that was all the mess of the way that I felt I looked. So with that comes disordered eating.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real place for this to be talked about. And I think it's really unusual that two people are drawn together with such different backgrounds, but a very similar fuck up around food. Yes.
I mean, you know, going back to your story of dysmorphia, and we are going to get to the kind of marital aspect of this. I remember having that similar dysmorphia. I think we've talked about it in one of the vlogs. But my dysmorphia wasn't around whether I ate too much. I mean, I binge ate. I mean, I remember my mum used to get boxes of crisps from the cash and carry, because her partner's parents ran a corner shop. And we'd get all these crisps. I'd eat them in 2 days.
Yeah, you are a binge, major binge.
42 to 52 pack. I mean, a box.
We have really different binge tactics, but we do binge. I mean, I binge very little these days. A binge for me is like last night I had 6 rich tea biscuits. You know, biscuits are my weakness. I keep getting drawn back to that packet of biscuits. But yeah, I would describe you as a complete binge eater. You like, if I'm out all day and you've been working, I know 100% you're not going to have eaten. Not a thing. It's like it, and I find that so weird that you haven't thought about food at all, and yet you're a binge eater. But then what will happen is at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, all of that time that you didn't eat is suddenly compacted, and then it's just.
But it's not about food. I mean, you know,
there's two. No, because I was going to say there's two binges that you do. One is when you starve yourself and you binge because actually you get physically hungry. But your biggest binge is your emotional.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm really like, because I know how much you're going to hate yourself afterwards and how sad you are, and there'll be days of like, do you think I've put on weight and da-da-da. So that's why I find it frustrating when you binge. But sometimes I'm like, oh my God, don't go on at him about it, because you don't drink.
Well,
and you haven't drunk for 16 years. And sometimes I get mighty pissed because I just...
Sorry, I'll get very
17.
About it.
No. And sometimes all of us that can drink go out and get pissed because we just want that release from our own head. And sometimes, well, always, that to me is you not being able to do that, and you go to food because, and this is getting to the nub of what we're talking about here, is people have to understand that food deals with emotions for a lot of people, only temporarily, but it is a drug. It is the most difficult drug to use because you have to eat, because if you don't eat, you die. You have to fully abstain from drink and drugs because you can't have a bit. You have to have everything. And yet you can't do that with food. So sometimes it really breaks my heart, because I know the gargantuan effort it takes to be sober in a drink obsessed world. And sometimes when I see you binge on something, like I know we joke about it, but it hurts you when you do those binges, because you're filled with this self-loathing but it's a direct correlation.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is total self-sabotage. I mean, when I was drinking, for all the years I was drinking, drink helped me not eat. Drink allowed me to, in a sense, maintain, when I say a relatively attractive, but I mean, if I think through all the years and all the people I met and all the people I worked with and all the girls that I had relationships or flings with, I felt better about my body if I just didn't eat. And I would drink.
I would say, we used to go out and you'd say, should we go to lunch? And I'd be thinking, oh yeah, food, because I was such a food addict. And then it was about a year till I realised you never ate. Yeah, you were just drinking.
Yeah, and that's why my drinks were always vodka and Diet Coke, because
you were thinking about the calories.
And in a sense, there was such a huge food aspect to the way in which I drank. So yeah, you remove that. And it's actively promoted in rehab. Eat chocolate. Have a chocolate.
They don't do that anymore, you know.
Exactly.
Because, and this is just a little quick sort of sidebar here, guys. But well, actually, it's not. I think it's a massive part of this. But as lots of you know, Mark went to rehab and sober, and then at the same time that Mark challenged his drinking, I did my eating, and for a few years I went to Overeaters Anonymous, which is exactly the same program, but it's just with food. And it's just people with very disordered eating, and the spectrum is very broad. And it's really interesting. We spoke about this recently, didn't we, in our vlog, how many people would come into Overeaters Anonymous that had been to AA, CA, which is cocaine addicts, NA, narcotics addicts or whatever. And they were sitting there broken in Overeaters Anonymous saying, I have spent my whole life trying to avoid this program because this is where it started for me. And they finally realized that, because if you know anything about addiction, you will often cross addict. So when you gave up alcohol, you went extreme not eating, didn't you? And vice versa. And they say that most people's addiction, it started with food because at a young age, they learnt to control their feelings.
To comfort themselves.
Or swallow down their feelings.
Stuff
with food.
Feelings.
And, there was some stuff that happened with me as a child that I know that I used food to shut up those feelings. And eventually, well, you either die shutting up your feelings or you get to a point where you go, I've got to look at this shit. Well, and I think eventually you will end up going to OA. and I think it will be fascinating for you, and I think it will be the last step for you.
I mean, I think one of the most difficult things about being in a partnership, and I'd say it's less the case now, but it can still happen, is, there's often this thing with drinking and drugging where there's someone in a group, it was never me, because I was always the one that would go down or be taken down. There's someone in a group who's a very good facilitator of people with real problems getting really, in my instance, drunk or high. And it told them, the signaling to them was, I'm not as bad as him.
Yeah.
Right. And I was surrounded by really only people who did that. And so I became the fall guy.
Well, at least I'm not as bad as Mark.
Yeah, exactly. And I think on occasions, certainly in the past, but every now and then it still kicks up. If you say, oh, let's just throw the caution to the wind in a night and let's just have McDonald's and and I'll always have 2 Big Macs, not 1. There's a huge, I feel like a permission has been granted to go for it. And that's it. The sort of, the zipper has been unzipped.
Just like down the pub.
Yeah. And I will go further than you.
Yeah.
And then I want you to stay with me. So I'll
go to the corner.
Or I'll go to the corner shop after. I need something sweet. And that's when the guilt kicks in. Because then at that point I'm on my own. And I think one of the other things I do struggle with, and this isn't a criticism, is you and your family, and I'm saying this from a place of, I've made shows about the importance of food to families, so this isn't me not understanding the importance of food, culturally, socially, familially, all that kind of stuff. But your family pivots around food. I mean, like just the other night.
We were winding you up a bit,
No,
though.
but just the other night, the discussion about food. No, but I mean, I could sense that. But it was a caricature of yourself.
Yeah, we were winding
But you are often like that. And so I go silent around that because I can't talk about food in the same way. It doesn't hold that allure. It's
difficult.
a functional
I
thing.
write cookery books, a lot of my career
I've
is
worked
around
with
food.
I mean, I understand it. I get it. I understand also when abroad, I like nice food when it's put in front of me, but it's not my first thought.
Do you like nice food though? I feel that your family, like it's very difficult. Like years ago, your mum used to come and used to enjoy. I mean, the difference of if my family come round and your family came round always was that actually this is the case for most families. But because you're a family that grew up with trays on your lap, didn't you? You said you never got the table out to eat.
At a table, no.
I find sometimes there's a difficult to have a centre to a social because people come, and it's the same with friends. People come or have a drink or have something to eat, and that's the centre. But because it's the way often that people do show that they care. There's a lot of care put into thinking about what you're going to cook for people, buying the food,
I think there's
cooking
a lot of English
it.
people that don't feel like that at all.
It's very
The vast
cultural with
majority,
us.
I think the vast majority don't feel like that.
I think it's getting a lot better. People, and I think maybe very much in London as well. But yeah, I think that's a real huge cultural difference there. And sometimes, for me, if people just come in and you don't just feed them, or you don't, because in a way it is showing love, and that can go extremely the wrong way and get disordered eating. But it's also something I would never have gone without.
No.
If you said to me, okay, you've had this problem with disordered eating and all the pain and everything that goes on with that, would you have taken away the experiences that you had and the connections that you had with food? I would say absolutely not. Because there's also a lot of warmth and a lot of care. And the Greeks and the Italians and the Spanish are all the same.
Yeah, but you often say, oh my God, culturally it's a nightmare as well.
Exactly,
because there's so much bread and all that.
Things are rarely one thing are they? I mean,
But I literally don't think about food. And the first thing you'll say to me when we haven't been with each other is, what have you eaten? And in a way, maybe I avoid food for so long because I just don't want to engage with it, because I can't engage with it sensibly, or I can't engage with it in a safe way. So when you talk about food, it's a magnified thing, because it is normal for you to all talk about the importance of an I'm saying aubergine in food. I recognise that. I've had, I've filmed people having those conversations about the joy of Italian food. It literally, I think the reason it doesn't interest me is that I'm trying to white knuckle and hold it at arm's length.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you take both of our families, I believe that your mum and your nan had extreme eating disorders. I mean, I've never seen anything
Well, my nan
like
used to say the same thing. The Adderleys run to fat, Mark. Be careful. And then she'd say that, and she'd put 3 hot cross buns and a pile of 7 Hovis biscuits 10 minutes before I went to bed. That's what she gave me every night.
And that's your binge. That's what you do now.
That's where I got my nighttime binge
You
from.
binge now before you go to bed. Both have eating disorder. I mean, you can't. It's so bizarre the way your family eats, and you all starve for hours and hours and hours, and then eat ludicrously ridiculous, unhealthy stuff, and you all look knackered, and you're all, and so. If for me, it's like a massive problem, because I'm looking and I want you to live till you're 90, and I want you to live well, and I want you to be well. So I do really worry. It's like your mum, I've given up saying now, you really shouldn't eat a whole pot of ice cream at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's really bad for you. So we understand where all this messed up stuff comes from in our head, I think. And I think that, if somebody's listening to this and thinking, well, this is me, but what do we do? we fail often, if that's the right word, to have more, to have more ordered eating. But we have found a way for us, haven't we, that actually works a lot of the time. It's the best thing for us. And what I would say is something that I learned from Mark being at rehab is to check with all the different things why you are reaching for food. And it's to say, am I tired? Am I lonely? Am I sad? Am I angry? Because if I'm reaching for something and I'm just going to put it in my mouth without really being hungry, it's probably because I'm dealing with some sort of, I call it this, that kind of feeling of anxiety that you're not even aware of. When I was younger, I could find myself down a whole loaf of bread and I didn't even know I ate it. But now I can find myself into 5 biscuits like I was yesterday, and I can see what I'm doing here. Distract yourself. Say to yourself, actually, this is what I did yesterday. It's been a really hard 48 hours. Somebody that I care about very much is going through a really tough time. It triggered a lot of feelings for me about something that happened in my past. And I turned to biscuits last night when I came home from work. And I ate 5 or 6 biscuits that I didn't need, that were as dry as a badger's arse. And I was just like, I was just stuffing into my mouth because I didn't know what to do with my feelings. And then in the end, I said to you, actually, I feel really flat and I feel sad and I feel this and I feel that. And then we watched telly and we've
been joking recently about the Maltesers and you know, I can't, if I know they're there, I will search them out and I will sabotage my evening. I struggle.
What happens? Do you ever do that thing when you're looking at it going, I'm going to eat these because actually I'm really anxious? You go into a sort of dark.
You know, like when a shark goes into bite and its eyes roll back into its head. I go there. And I don't want to get upset about it. I really don't. But
well, no, tell me.
No. I really, really struggle at night. I mean, I really struggle in the evenings. And I think it's still a hangover from being busy, in inverted commas, in a very unproductive and unhealthy way, socializing all the time with drink. Drink allowed me to be a social beast. I'm not a social beast anymore. I'm barely social. And I think I haven't got that social distraction of an evening. So I really struggle. You know, during the day I can ignore it because I'm busy, I'm working, I'm doing stuff. But in the evenings, when you take away all of those distractions, I am really ill at ease with myself. Unless, say, for example, I throw myself into writing or continue working or doing something or making something, or, you know, and I feel absolutely at sea in that hour before I go to bed. And I don't know what that is. I literally don't know why that is or what it's about. And I can only really think that it's an echo of the fear I felt at night when I was much younger. And it sounds so fucking obvious and some cod psychology that, you know, it's hardwired into me that
cod psychology is sometimes the very real thing.
I think it's just hardwired into me that food was always either a mechanism to cope or an expression of extreme love, which had gone over the top. And that hurts in the evening. It really hurts. And so when you ask, you know, what's going through my head, it's extreme pain. And an inability to use anything to quieten that pain. So,
yeah. But
so I know I have to do something about it.
But hang on, just let's before we move on to having to do something about it, I think you just put so beautifully and hopefully gave people that don't understand an understanding of how this works. And it's not just a case of eat less and move more. It is so complex, the relationship that so many of us have with food. And it breaks my heart because, and I'm sort of sitting here feeling bad for all the times I've screamed and shouted at you because you've eaten 10 packets of Maltesers, we've eaten all the Nutella and everything.
But I know you're kind of trying to do it in a light-hearted way most of the time.
No, but I think it's more than that, because I think underneath I'm actually screaming at the fact that there is that unhappiness in there and that pain in there. That's because I know it's not the fucking Nutella, it's not the fucking Maltesers. It's that pain. And that, as a person that loves you so much, is what I find the most difficult, is just always knowing that you're that unhappy, you know.
But I think a huge aspect of it as well is it's a last clutch at safety, you know. And I think it is a huge part of, you know, if I look back, it's weird, isn't it? The two extreme relationships I had with food. You know, because if you look at a calendar year of me as a child, I would, for want of not literally starved, I don't know, you know, but I would be on a restrictive diet at term time, and then I would be filled with food. So it was binge eating, but spread across a year.
But so everything you said is so important, because I'm just praying that there are people who are listening to this that all their life have just thought that they're just greedy or they're lazy or whatever. And you've just said it with such clarity that it is such a powerful drug to stop the pain in the minutes you're eating, chewing and swallowing. Of course, we know that rather like crack cocaine, for those minutes where you feel okay, but afterwards it's going to be the worst fucking feeling on the planet because the crash is so bad. The physical effects of overeating are horrible, the numbing out, the exhaustion. Then you go to the mental effects of that, the self-loathing, the disgust, the lowering of self-esteem. This stuff is serious. It's really, really serious. And I just want people to understand that that's all the stuff that's going on behind when you see someone stuff their face. They're not just greedy bastards.
We're going to come to the end now, but if I look back, binge eating has always been there. I mean, if I go out, I will more than often have a chocolate bar before I get back. So it's a kind of crafty drink. It's like a crafty drink. When I was with Izzy's mum, there was this strange period where on the way home, I would buy smoked salmon. Oh. And I would homp it in an alleyway around.
As a fellow binge eater, I'm just going to say I think that's a really shit binge.
No. But I had this compulsion. But the weirdest thing was I'd eat it outside the Sainsbury's, almost hidden, and then would worry about, oh my God, have I got smoked salmon on breath as I was coming home.
Almost like you wanted to get caught. I mean, it's the strongest smell you could have, apart from cheese and onion. I mean, I remember there were some years where I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe what I'm finding in this car. Just packet after packet of stuff.
I know. Yeah.
I would suggest that one day we walk together into an OA meeting. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, and the myth is that people, I mean, there's been OA meetings next to many AA meetings I've been to, and contrary to what people think, you know, the title of it, I think, is an issue for it as a fellowship.
Yeah. It's very uncool.
It's not just uncool, but I think it signals the wrong thing to people, because people think there's judgment in it, or the term overeating culturally is just...
I wish it was called positive. Emotional Eating Anonymous, because that's actually what it's about. So if you're...
There's many thin people, you know, too thin people in Overeaters Anonymous. It's not like, you know, I think people assume it's people who are overweight.
Yeah, well, no, it is people that have a problem with emotional eating. So if your interest has been piqued by this in Overeaters Anonymous, I think just quickly, I'll just say what it's like. It's a group. You don't have to speak. You can just listen. If you go to the group, look for the similarities, not the differences. So you might see somebody, you might be very overweight, and you might see somebody as skinny, like bone thin, and you might decide, I'm going to turn off, I'm not going to listen to this person, because what on earth would they know? You will be amazed in the similarities of what they might say around food. And they are organisations right across the globe. OA is in every town and city, and also it's online. So if you want to have a listen and have a go, do. And they say give it at least 6 meetings before you make your decision.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of the word God, because some people go to their first meeting, because it's exactly the same for AA or anything. This is the same. It's all the same fellowships. They get scared because they start with a prayer where they say God.
They say God as you know it. It's just something,
and that's what's important to
in.
hear.
Yeah.
Because when I was going to OA, God as I knew it was the group.
Yeah.
That was the thing that was more powerful than myself, because I was totally powerless in the way I was eating in those days. It was more powerful in myself, and that's what kept me on
and your
the
higher,
path.
it's a higher power, but it can be a beanie baby. It can be an object. It can be it can be things. It can be a space. It can be anything.
And I still use the tools, like they're just there when I was saying about those things. What stopped me going into a major binge last night was I stopped and I used the tools of OA, which were why, how, what for. And then I just talked about my emotions instead, and I didn't carry on eating all night. I still use the Serenity Prayer. At the moment, I'm using the Serenity Prayer 4, 5, 6 times a day. Look up the Serenity Prayer if you're having trouble with anxiety today, and and so it can be a very powerful thing, stepping into one of those meetings if you feel like nobody anywhere is understanding you. And I've spoken to a lot of people that have come out of eating disorder clinics, and OA has never been mentioned to them, and they've gone and said, oh, it was a really good way, because it doesn't cost anything. That's the other thing, they're free. So
there you go. There you go.
I just say I love you very much, and I think you're really brave to talk in the way that you did about that, because I think it's still so much harder for men to talk about it than it is for. It's hard for everybody, but I still think that there's a lot of taboos still around men talking about.
All the men I know have known in my life, I would never have talked about. I would never. You wouldn't talk about this kind of thing.
I'm gonna come and give you a hug.
Oh no. Hey.
I feel sad.
I love you. I love you too. Well, there you go, guys. That was highs and lows and helter skelter and roller coaster and all those analogies.
Yeah, I mean, and like if you were here for marriage, there is nothing as powerful as actually sitting opposite your partner, asking them questions and listening to them. And I think life is so busy and frantic and scary at the moment that we're probably doing that less than ever. So I actually, even though that was painful and emotional and it's put me in a bit of turmoil, I'm really glad. I'm really glad we had that conversation.
Okay, go away now. I'll see you later.